Netflix's Receiver series showcases a frustrated Justin Jefferson, but maybe not for the reasons you thought. Welcome to the Locked On Vikings podcast.
You are Locked On Vikings, your daily Minnesota Vikings podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Locked On Vikings podcast, where we're always trying to learn something new. It's part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And thank you so much for making Locked On Vikings your first listen of the day each and every day. Truly, thank you, especially to those of you who hung out all summer while we did the Everyman series and a playbook series and all this really cool stuff, which of course you can go check out if any of that sounds interesting to you. If you are new here, hello, welcome. My name is Luke, and we're going to talk a little bit about Netflix today. The Receiver series finally came out, shed a little bit of light on some of the major questions from the 2023 season, as well as an entry into the Everyman series. Today's episode is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. So today on the show, let's relitigate something that's over, which I usually wouldn't do. But since the Netflix show came out, Receiver, it's out in full in its entirety. You can watch it now. You can find a lot of answers and a lot of kind of inside moments into some of the stuff that you will honestly remember from the 2023 season, including this, Jefferson's injury, his reaction to Kirk's injury, some of the key moments. And just getting to know Justin Jefferson as a very fun personality. By the way, if you haven't checked it out yet and you're just watching for Justin Jefferson, you can skip the entire first episode. That one just does the 49ers and Lions, and then the second episode does Jefferson and Devontae Adams exclusively. So you just skip right to the Jefferson part, and then he's not in the last bits at all. Once the show starts covering the playoffs, obviously they don't really stop to pay any attention to the Vikings or Raiders as they go home. But maybe the first thing that everybody wants to know about is how much was the contract thing affecting the season? And very little, if at all, is the answer to that. At least the way the show shows it. It's basic. There's like one segment where it comes up, and they kind of make that the segment where they cover the issue, and he basically parrots the way that Adam Schefter had reported on it, and I super believe that he's telling the truth because this is a documentary. But the way that Schefter reported it was they got really close to a deal at the outset of the 2023 season. He decided to play out that both sides decided, okay, let's play this out. Let's revisit this next off season, and that was that. And that there was no additional discussion until there was time for that to happen, until the summer, basically, until I think a week or two before the deal actually got done. They basically never really even reapproached the subject, and that everybody was okay with that being the plan, that there was no tension, that there was no sitting there tapping your watch and saying, when is the negotiation going to restart? That was all on our end as impatient fans, and that was an amicable thing pretty much throughout. And that is essentially what that segment does. There's one kind of weird interaction where he's wearing a chain at practice, and Kevin O'Connell is like, "Ooh, nice chain. Where'd you get that?" And he's like, "Hey, it's pretty nice, right? Imagine what I'll get when I get the contract." And it's kind of like a weird joke. There are a lot of moments throughout the whole thing, though, of Justin Jefferson and Kevin O'Connell bantering and joking together. And you can tell that their relationship is really fun and boisterous and dynamic. So that's not something to worry about unless you were really coming in frothing at the mouth looking for a reason to be like, aha, I knew everything was horrible, but it super wasn't. What really bugs Justin Jefferson throughout the whole thing is that he spent half the season not being able to play. That's what really frustrates him. But the contract stuff, he's to me, he looks really excited to sign the contract. And that is, maybe I'm doing the same thing. Maybe I'm confirming my own priors, but my understanding of the way that these negotiations work means that he probably knew all year how much money, he probably had a sense for the colossal amount of money that was coming his way, and he knew that it was only a matter of time. So yeah, of course he's going to be a little bit giddy about it and maybe a little bit cocky about it. So I guess just kind of like going moment by moment, the contract does come up for like that one segment, but the first really like brutal moment for Jefferson comes up from week 2, the Eagles game, when he catches that pass right before halftime and he fumbles out the back of the end zone or out the side of the end zone, like one of those like corner pylon fumbles. That's a touchback. And he really beats himself up over it. Like he really takes that hard and takes it to heart to the point where like other people have to be like, dude, it's okay. Like it happens. Like it's over. You've got to move on, man. Like you're beating yourself up too much over this, but that's just the kind of competitor that he is. And the through line for Justin Jefferson is competitor to the core. And for all of these guys, for Amon-Ra St. Brown and Devontae Adams and Kittle and Debo, like all of these guys are extraordinarily competitive individuals. You don't make it to this level without having that edge to you. Even the soft-spoken ones have that edge to them, and it just manifests in a different way. But regardless, after that game in the visitors' locker room, it doesn't look like they let the Netflix camera in there, but Kevin O'Connell was still mic'd up. Or maybe you could just hear from outside. But you get the audio of Kevin O'Connell lighting them up in the locker room after that game. As aggressive as O'Connell has ever been, swearing at them and all that stuff. And here's the thing. Look, we covered Mike Zimmer for 8 years here in Minnesota. That was adorable. That little pep talk, that little that little locker room freak out. If that's the most O'Connell could muster, that's cute. That's got nothing on a Wednesday practice from Mike Zimmer for a cornerback that like opened the gate a little bit too much on his press coverage. I don't know. And people are like, whoa, he really had that in him. Like people really reacted to that part as though they were this like really intense moment. And to me, it read like the most a guy could muster that can't muster much of that. Cause it's just not O'Connell's leadership style. And that's valid. It's just not what he does. And you could kind of like, I don't know. It just felt like he was a bit out of his comfort zone there, trying to really light up a team after they had turned the ball over 7 times in their first 2 games. Like he really was, I think, upset about that, but I don't know. It didn't really, I don't know if that one would have landed. So he has this cute moment in Carolina. By the way, I should have said at the beginning that I'm going to like spoil the whole thing. I kind of figure if you're listening to a recap, you've already signed on for that. But if you care, and I've already spoiled the Eagles game for you, it's okay. I'm only like 20 minutes into the first episode he shows up in. But they pick back up with the Vikings for the Carolina game. They're 0-3, and it's mostly about how his relationship with his parents and his family, because they were all at that game, and he actually celebrated a touchdown with them in that game. He like grittied up to them, and they were like right there in the end zone. So that was cute. And then you get to the Chiefs game, and the way they edit this is sinister, where they have him talking about the like fake hamstring pull gritty that he did in 2022. And he's like talking to the CBS crew and joking around about like it's the Stan the Man. And then of course that's the game where he actually pulls his hamstring. And that's where Jefferson, you really get to see him be frustrated. And this is, I guess, why when he is shown to be happy on this show, I believe that it is genuine, because they do not pull punches on this show with Jefferson or with other ones. Devontae Adams in particular is like proof positive that this show is not a PR campaign. This ain't a press conference. And I think I've been a little bothered by this, especially with Jefferson. Every report, every quote, every bit of evidence we had in that whole contract thing, it was a mountain of evidence that the negotiation was amicable, that it would pick up whenever they planned to, and that everything was going to be fine. And lo and behold, it was. They got the deal done. Very little drama to it, unless you like exclusively listened to Mike Florio, who tried to make drama out of it really hard. But one of the refrains that I would always get when I said that was like, well, of course he says that. He's just saying the right things. Well, of course you hear that. They're all just running interference. And like the size of that conspiracy grows and grows and grows, or every reporter has to be in on it, and every player and every coach has to be perfectly coordinated. And it's like, you get that, but also Occam's razor. You could just have taken what they said at face value, been way less stressed about the whole thing, and it would have been fine. I think there's a lesson to be learned in that. And in this show, you can see him be really pissed off. He's frustrated at having to go through the rehab process and learning that patience, but he's also frustrated when he gets hurt again later on in the season. So there's still a good bit to talk about here. And then, of course, we've got the Everyman series coming up later as well. Today's episode of Locked On Vikings is brought to you by Gametime, the best place to find last-minute tickets. Look, it is summer. Sometimes in Minnesota, it even isn't raining, and that means maybe it's a great time to go down to Target Field and try to catch a Twins game. But whether it's a Twins game, some other sporting event, or anything, concerts, theater, comedy, whatever, get the tickets at Gametime. Whether you're buying last minute, trying to save up to 60%, which you can buying last minute just by virtue of like working the market properly, which is what Gametime does for you. Or if you're trying to find, say, NFL tickets right now, if you're trying to get to the home opener or like the London game or the home game against Green Bay or any other road game, anything, you can find great deals on Gametime. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off. Download Gametime today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Continuing on here with this Locked On Vikings episode, we're going to probably talk about receiver and other Vikings topics on the Minnesota Football Party, which you can catch on the Locked On Minnesota Sports YouTube page. You can also catch the 24/7 live stream, all things Minnesota sports, all day long. Just go to the YouTube page, search out Locked On Minnesota Sports, go to the live tab, and you can see a 24/7 feed. In Netflix's receiver show, after Justin Jefferson hurts his hamstring, then you can see him really get frustrated. And this is, again, why I believe it. If you want to know what Justin Jefferson is like when he is frustrated, when he's really pissed off about something, you get to see it when he's in rehab. He looks like genuinely dead. Like he really looks, for the first time, he looks like he's not enjoying what he's doing. When he's on the sideline, when he's playing, even when he's playing in a meaningless game, and he's only been in the playoffs once as a Viking, but even when he's doing all of that, he's happy-go-lucky. He is having a blast and a half. But when he's in that pool and he's doing his rehab and he's talking about it, he talks about the lessons that he had to learn. And everydayers will have heard this phrase before many a time in the Everyman series when you talk about anybody who was hurt in college. But you have to learn a patience. Justin Jefferson's hamstring injury was the first injury that caused him to miss time, and the first game that he missed at all since high school. He had not been hurt before, like at all. I think people, because he got hurt twice, I heard somebody say that like he's injury prone now, which is a very funny cognitive short circuit. But he's not used to this. So the idea of missing time, being on the sideline is absolutely killing him. You have to learn patience. You have to learn to do a little bit all day and understand that you did the right amount all day. There's no extra mile you can take. I think it is really bad the way that Justin Jefferson's absence was covered. We need to discuss how to do that better. It's not acceptable. It's not good enough. The way that his hamstring injury was covered, most of the discourse surrounding it, that wasn't the dry report of, he's doubtful this week, expected back, blah, 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 timeline reporting, which I think is honestly all we need from the media. I don't think we need a lot of opinions about injury recovery, because unless you're going to come out with information and say, well, this is, what's wrong with his ankle, and this is the typical, like if you're going to come out with information, then that's fine. But the way that the conversation went last year, and this is shown in the show, was about Justin Jefferson basically sandbagging his injury because of the contract. Adam Schefter said it. Mike Florio said it. They're quoted in the show. A lot of people in the Minnesota local media said it. Hey, his contract is not, why risk coming back early and risk aggravating your injury further when you've got a contract coming and the season's dead anyways and nobody cares. He refutes this in no uncertain terms. He says, that nobody can tell me not to play. Would never do it. He says I would never tank the season. Suck on that, tank Twitter. He is too much of a competitor. He shows up and he wants to win games. And that's what's in these people's minds. Like, you have to understand they're not thinking like Madden franchise mode where they can just sim to the next season and say, well, let's just get a good draft pick. If you're playing the Detroit Lions tomorrow, your brain wants to beat the heck out of the Detroit Lions. You're not thinking, what is this going to do for my draft capital? You're thinking, if we beat them by 50, that'd be great. Like, that's where your head is. And that's where all of these players' heads have always been. There's thousands of quotes, I would imagine, about that exact thing. Because every time there's a team that's 3-12 going into the last game of the season, they're always going to have quotes like that. And it is just universally true. So I think it's a naive and kind of immature thing to call for, to say, what if he just didn't, so that we could get better draft position. But also I think it's immature to ask him to sandbag that injury. You're part of a team, right? And he is enthusiastically part of this team, and it's not in his blood to do that. So I think it is to ask that question as incessantly as it was asked is an insult to Justin Jefferson's character, and I genuinely think people owe him an apology. It's so far away from who he is, and to especially people who believed that it was true and that everyone was just lying to us about it with their tinfoil hats on, is just runs so counter to the character that we have gotten to know over 4 years now in a documentary and plenty of press conferences and plenty of stuff. We've gotten to know him as a community of football watchers to not be that kind of guy. And the assumption that he just is going to be anyways is just that. It's an assumption. And I don't really understand what evidence people are going off of. Is it just because he's a wide receiver and other wide receivers has done this? Because that's just straight up stereotyping. We don't want that. That's not smart. That's not good. Stereotypes aren't good logic. Maybe they made for good stand-up comedy back in 2006, but it's not good logic, right? It's not sound. Or maybe people who just want to be negative because it feels better. I think a lot of it was that, honestly. But either way, I think if you were convinced in your heart of hearts at the time, and look in the mirror, right? Maybe you weren't. And hopefully listeners of this show weren't, because I didn't really talk about it much. And when it did get brought up, I shut it down pretty quick, or I tried to, because I understood, or I had made the effort to understand who this guy was. And I haven't even gotten the privilege to talk to him. So if you have gotten the privilege to talk to him and you've made less effort than I have, I got a problem with you. But this really comes to a head in the Raiders game, where he has to go out again and he's really frustrated. And you can just tell by the tone of voice the trainers have to take with him to explain to him that this could be life-threatening. We need to get you to the hospital now. You have to forget about the football game. You are at risk of sepsis. The delicate tone of voice that they have to say is look, I know it's not what you want to hear, but we have to enact potentially life-saving care here. To me, that says everything. And were he given the choice, he would have played through it. And he would have risked sepsis so that he could get on the field and maybe try to give the Vikings a better chance at winning. And then he came back the next week. Over the season, Justin Jefferson suffered. He suffered mentally. He suffered physically, external and internal injury. And even when he came back, then he was frustrated with all the quarterback stuff that we were all frustrated with. He didn't blame any particular person. He said it was just having kind of this carousel. You can't get on the same page with people. It's a chorus that we've heard a lot, and it's been frustrating to a lot of receivers, and he's no exception. And he was frustrated with that. And I think that if we can maturely look at a frustrated human being and ask, what will he do about that? The answer was sign a gigantic contract and approach the next year with the same attitude, the same happy-go-lucky and unshakable confidence that he had going into last season. Last season taught him hard lessons. And that's part of life. And now here we are in the next one. And he's going to attack it with the same excitement that he's attacked all the seasons prior. And that's something we can all get really, really stoked on. We know a little bit more about who Justin Jefferson is, or at least we had what we already thought confirmed if you weren't trying to drum up drama so that you could get some clicks. Can you tell I'm a little frustrated with how this narrative has played out over the last year? I am sick of answering your questions as inspired by certain NBC Sports properties. Let's get out of this. And next up, we'll talk about Bo Richter on the Everyman series. On Locked On Vikings, the Everyman series is a series talking about every single new Viking, not necessarily a preview of their play or analysis, but their journey to the NFL, their story, and trying to understand who they are as humans. Can you tell this is important to me? To talk about Bo Richter, the edge rusher out of the Air Force, we have to ask, why does someone join the military? I'm sure I have plenty of military, both current and former, listening to this show. If you're watching on YouTube and you want to leave a comment, I would love to hear your reasoning. Why did you join the military? Was it out of a sense of country? Was it for the benefits? Was it a money thing? Was it just, the path that called to you for whatever reason? I'm curious. I would love to hear your stories. Some people do it, though, for the education, the career opportunities that come with it, the government benefits. All that stuff is in place for a reason, to encourage enrollment, right? That is what brought Bo Richter to the Air Force. He chose it because he wanted somewhere where he could be a part of a real-life football program and get a quality education. And he chose Air Force because they checked it checked those two boxes for him. Not necessarily, a family history of military. A lot of people do it. My dad did military. I do the military. A lot of people will do it, again, out of this sense of patriotism or a desire to go be involved in whatever. It doesn't seem like that. It seemed like it was really about the prestige of the institution as an educational thing and the prestige of the institution as a football thing, as compared to his other options in recruiting. At the time, he was an off-ball linebacker, and he'll be an off-ball linebacker for a lot of his time in Air Force, and when he moves, we'll get to that, but when he first shows up there, it is jarring. When you first get to boot camp and basic training, and again, military people, please chime in and tell me your stories. I love hearing them. But I looked up a basic training itinerary. And I just Googled it and found one because I didn't do this. But you would get up at 4:45. And again, military people, let me know how I do here. You get up at 4:45. Physical conditioning is at 5. So you have a second to get dressed and 15 minutes to get dressed and get over to where your conditioning is. So you do a little cardio at 5 a.m. And then it's class, meals, workout, class, meals, lights out at 2100 hours. It's just a constantly full day. And you are out cold at 9 p.m. And lest anybody be concerned that the benefits of GI Bill style kind of incentives to join the military are a thing that people are just going to try to join the military just to exploit, this kind of thing will weed you out quick. If you aren't cut out for it, most of the dropouts, I guess, happen in the first week, I suppose. So for Bo Richter, this isn't an issue because Bo Richter really wants to play football. He wants to play professional football, and he has that same unwillingness to quit on the dream that so many of the people that we have covered in this Everyman series have. This determination and this unrelenting hunger that makes getting up a little early and doing some cardio in the morning easy work. It reminds me of a slogan. I've started to hear it everywhere. I first heard it from Mackenzie Alexander. He would always put this hashtag every time he tweeted, was all work is easy work. And I love that, right? The work is simple. You put one foot in front of the other. Running's the easiest thing you'll ever do. You put one foot in front of the other, and it's just a matter of willpower. The other thing that's weird about service academies is the way that they play football. Everybody, I think, is pretty familiar with the reputation that a school like Army has, and an Air Force is kind of similar, where they'll run 56 times. And so Air Force has to play against a team like Army. And this is where Bo Richter's weird position change comes in. So Bo Richter is coming in as a very small edge rusher, very similar to the Andre Carter build. And some of that is because of the military conditioning that you have to do. You're not exactly in football shape, you're in military shape, and that's just a different kind of body composition. So the work to like bulk up and stuff, hopefully what Andre Carter has been doing this offseason, and this is kind of the camp where we're supposed to see something out of him. But Bo Richter's in that same boat. But he's also undersized because he was an off-ball linebacker, not like a hand-in-the-dirt edge rusher. But the thing about these service academy games is that there's a lot of like wing T. These are old-school, run-only offenses. And that means that they are going to line up the line of scrimmage with all kinds of blockers. And you kind of have to line up the line of scrimmage with all kinds of defenders as well. So there's two ways you can approach this if you run a more traditional defense. You can take all of your off-ball linebackers and line them up on the line of scrimmage and accept your size disadvantage. Or you can put in all your bigger bodies, but now you're putting in second and third stringers that might not be as good. They might not trust as much. This is the dilemma that these service academies want to put you in, right? They want to put your fifth string defensive tackle in and then double team that guy all day. So Bo Richter will play up on the line of scrimmage, but this goes way better for Air Force than they ever expected. He's unblockable. He uses his quickness. He beats all these big, hefty blocking, run maulers, and just like racks up all kinds of disruptions. And so the move to defensive lineman actually turns into this relatively permanent thing. His last game at Air Force was a full-on dismantling of the James Madison Dukes, who are definitely this was their first bowl game and were one of the stories of college football last year. And then they run into Air Force and they get absolutely like welcome to the big leagues. And a big catalyst in that was Bo Richter himself, who racked up sacks, who was just totally unblockable in that game. That is the impression that he leaves Air Force with. But the pre-draft process is not kind to him. He's a tweener. He's just from the service academy. He doesn't get a combine invite. So now getting eyes on him is not great. And he'll go to a pro day and show out enough there to get an undrafted contract, but he's not going to be drafted. And so now he lands in this weird kind of in-between ground here in Minnesota, where his odds to make the 53-man roster are basically only exist in a formal sense. I don't think the goal for him is for him to sneak onto the roster right now. Either he proves that he, as a smaller school prospect, as a non-combine invite, he proves that he is not of the right of this tier, and then that's that. And congratulations, you got your degree at Air Force, and that was part of what you wanted. Or he shows enough potential where they practice squat him and then they bulk him up, and we kind of move on from there in the same way we kind of did with Andre Carter, although they did stash Andre Carter on the roster and they actually put him in the games a little bit. So you go that route where, okay, now we put you in the incubator. We bring you in, you're part of our practice squad, you're basically never going to see the field, but you have access to the weight room for a whole year. Let's see what you can make of yourself. That's kind of the dilemma here of Bo Richter, the situation that Bo Richter is in. So it's kind of tough because that's a tenuous hold on a roster spot anyways. Those developmental guys, suddenly your patience starts to wear really thin when you suddenly start to get low at another position because of like injuries or whatever. Things happen every year. And then suddenly you're looking at this guy that you're going to wait 2 years before you see anything from him. And you go, well, we're just going to cut you for a guy we can use right now. So he needs a patience that teams struggle to have. If he does work out and become a good player, it'll be a great story. And one that I'm sure has a lot more fleshing out to do because the Air Force edge rusher is not going to have a lot of stuff written about him to use for this. But If the question is one of work ethic, I think we have that one answered. I'll talk to y'all tomorrow. And as always, Skull.